Hey there, Mr. Reddit here. Welcome back to another episode of r/MaliciousCompliance. Our first story we'll be reading today. Neighbor tells Gramps he should mind his own business. That advice costs neighbor most of his yard and a car. After that, I know the rules. Do you? After that, you're gonna call the client and tell them exactly why? Sure thing. After that, insult me for having white hair? Have fun covering my shift. And then we'll be wrapping up with, that's fine, I'll stop working at 40 hours. And if you're new, please subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Neighbor tells Gramps he should mind his own business. That advice costs neighbor most of his yard and a car. Gramps had just moved into a retirement park with a lot that backed up to county land that was a nature preserve. His backyard was basically non-existent, but he didn't mind as long as he got to look out over the preserve. However, he did marvel at how his next-door neighbor's backyard extended a good 8 feet past his, giving neighbor a nice space back there. Gramps tried to be friendly with all his new neighbors, exchanging phone numbers and the like, and one day he noticed the next-door neighbor was putting down expensive pavers that extended from his back door all the way to the old fence posts that designated the preserve boundary. Gramps watched the neighbor yank the 3 rickety fence posts out of the ground and move them back an extra 2 feet into the preserve before pounding them back in, then started to clear the land, intending to gain himself more area for his pavers. Gramps used to work for the National Park Services as a young lad, so he thought he had better warn his neighbor of the consequences of his actions, so he heads out back for a little chat. Neighbor is immediately defensive, and before Gramps says much, neighbor tells him, "You're new here. I've been here for 10 years. And to mind your own dang business." Gramps decides not to press the issue. Nothing happens that year, but the following year, when most of the park emptied out to head north for the summer, the county comes by to check on the preserve. Gramps notices them going back and forth behind his neighbor's house, so the workers are pulling out maps and taking photos and making phone calls, and soon more guys show up. Turns out, neighbor has moved the posts several times over the years, and in reality, his backyard is supposed to be even smaller than Gramps' backyard. To make it worse, neighbor put pavers in the back specifically to park both his golf cart and a cherry red sports car back there for the summer. So the county will have to move them before they can do anything else. They tape a notice to the front door and leave. Gramps goes over to read it, and it states that neighbor was in violation of encroaching onto protected lands. He has 30 days to move his car, tear up the pavers, and pay a fine of $11,000 because of damage to endangered species who inhabit the protected lands, as well as trespassing fees. Failure to do so within 30 days will result in golf cart and car being towed and impounded. Pavers will be dug up and carted off at neighbor's expense, and the fine will be increased for every additional day past the deadline. 30 days comes and goes. So a week after that, Gramps has quite the show, as first the car and cart were towed, pavers were dug up and hauled off, and the old fence posts and ropes were replaced with metal posts embedded into buried cement bases connected by steel cables. The whole process took several weeks to finish, but the preserve looked a lot more legit when they were done. A few solar cameras were installed so the county could monitor the wildlife and encroachers remotely. Meanwhile, more notices were taped to the front door of neighbor's house. By November, the snowbirds were flooding back into the park, including neighbor. That was Gramps' second show of the summer, as neighbor reads all the notices, digging down until he reads the first one, then runs out back and starts screaming up a storm before running back to his car to dig out his cell phone so he can call the county to find out where his car and golf cart were. Gramps stays indoors to avoid the guy as he is frantically trying to unload his car, turn on his water and electricity, get the AC and the toilets going, and all the while trying to get someone at county to pick up the phone and give him some answers. He finally gets a live person and proceeds to scream at them while on speakerphone about his car and cart. So the call keeps getting kicked to other people because who wants to help a screamer? Basically, neighbor is told to come to the county office to get this straightened out. 3 days later, neighbor catches Gramps outside and asks if he was here when the county stole his car and destroyed his backyard. Gramps said he was, and neighbor says, "Well, why didn't you call me when you saw them putting notices on my door? You had my number up north." Gramps said he had thought about doing that, but figured neighbor would prefer him to mind his own dang business, so he decided against it. Next we've got, I know the rules. Do you? A little backstory. This happened years ago while I was working in retail. I had been at this place for 3 years, was cross-trained in every department, had never had a sick day, and was always available to cover shifts whenever they called me. The important thing to say is that we were also unionized. I would soon be getting married and moving across the country. So, being the good employee I was, I gave my store manager my termination notice a month before my last day instead of just 2 weeks, so he would have plenty of time to hire someone new. Here's the good part. A few days after I turned in my notice, I broke my foot in an act of stupidity. 3 avulsion fractures. They couldn't cast it. Doctor gave me some pain meds and a note saying I could continue to work as a cashier as long as I had a stool or something so I could help keep the weight off of my foot. The next day, I grabbed my cane and walked to work with my note. I explained the situation to my supervisor and union rep, and they pull a bar stool from the furniture section and put it in my cash booth. I spend the day working without a problem. The next day, my store manager sees me sitting on the stool and calls me into his office. I go in and he wants to know why I have a stool. The conversation goes roughly as follows. Manager: "Why are you sitting down while on shift?" Me: "Because I broke my foot, and the doctor says I cannot be standing on it all day. I have the note and the union's approval." Manager looks over the note and notices the cane beside my chair. "I can't let you keep the stool. If I did, we would have to make accommodations for everyone who got injured outside of working hours. Plus, it doesn't look professional to have you sitting at the front of the store." Now I know he isn't allowed to do that, and that I could have taken this up with the union and won the case. But with only 3 weeks left with the company, I would be lucky to have it resolved before I left. So I get a bright idea. "Okay, I will make you a deal instead of bringing this to the union. I will give up the stool, but in return, you need to make sure that every shift I work from now on is as the garden center cashier." My manager quickly agrees and thanks me for being understanding. He walks with me out to the garden center and explains to the current cashier that I will be taking over for the rest of the month. Now, being unionized is not always a great thing, but if you know the rules, you can get away with a lot without being fired. With my union, the key was to do exactly what was in your job description, so long as it didn't put you, your coworkers, or the company at risk. Since most of us liked our jobs and respected the store owner, not the manager, we always went above and beyond. But I was on my way out, and after my talk with manager, I no longer cared. A few days later, manager comes out to let the supervisor know that a shipment of flowers will be arriving sometime today. He apparently decided to check up on me and was completely speechless when he saw me. There I was, sitting on my register's counter, reading a book. Manager: "What on earth are you doing?" Me: "Waiting for the next customer to come up while taking the weight off of my foot." "Why?" "You know I could fire you for doing this, right?" My job is to be a cashier, which I am doing whenever someone comes up. There are no additional duties like cleaning or stocking for the garden center cashier. So between customers, I am taking the weight off my foot as per my doctor's note, minus the stool, of course. "I could still fire you for reading on the sales floor." "Please do. Since I have never received a warning or been written up, That would mean you were firing me for a first offense, which is not sufficient cause for the union. That would mean you would owe me 5 weeks severance, my unclaimed vacation time, and the pay I would miss between now and my final day. Now, you could also spend the next 2 weeks trying to catch me reading. That way you could issue me the required 3 warnings, followed by the required 3 write-ups. But that would eat up a lot of your time, and I am pretty sure I could have someone inside call to warn me if they see you coming this way. At this point, a man with a full cart of bags and dirt starts heading my way, and I hop off the register onto my good foot and hop around the register so I can serve him. Manager never came to see me again. Next we've got, you're gonna call the client and tell them exactly why? Sure thing. I work for a software company that started in the mid-80s. Since its inception, they've insisted on obtaining a system information sheet for every machine something gets installed on. They thought it would protect them from people installing on other machines since they have no other verification system of how many licenses are in use. They also attempt to charge a full hour's rate for the few minutes of time it takes to install one of our software packages. I understand their wariness of us getting stuck doing 150 workstations, but the average number of licenses at a client site is 2. The client pays a regular maintenance fee for support and product updates and are usually very angry when they get a new computer, need one of our programs installed, and then are told they have to fill out paperwork and still have their IT person/group perform the install. It's somewhat difficult and requires knowledge of networking and databases, and it's a frequent case where an IT person will charge them to mess it up and then will charge them to fix it. It's happened more than once that the IT person or a desperate client trying to do it on their own has messed it up so badly that there was a catastrophic, unrecoverable data loss. It's cost us more than a few clients, but the idea that someone might get one over on us by stealing a license is so abhorrent that management remains entrenched in the policy. We end up spending days going back and forth with clients to get pointless paperwork filled out to avoid doing 3 minutes of work. I'm not exaggerating. The software line I support takes under 5 minutes to install, even with the database/network complexity. And it's our poor receptionist that gets the brunt of it from the clients. No matter how many times our more technically inclined staff bring up things like terminal services, machine imaging, the fact that our passwords are stored in plain text, internet published environments, and any number of ways clients can easily get around per-seat licensing restrictions, they're not having it. So it happened again yesterday, where a client called in expecting a quick install on her machine, and Erin, the receptionist, had to explain and send over the paperwork. An irate Hannah, the client, called 4 more times over the next couple of days trying to get a different answer. She was eventually escalated to Dan in management, who said he'd come down and speak with us about it. But what he told us was to follow procedure. I tried to discuss it with him, and a few of the old-timers butted in. Laura from another team yelled loudly that I don't have the authority to change policy, which made Dan cower. Me. Why are we spending 2 days and 3 people's time to avoid doing 3 minutes worth of work? Laura. It's not 3 minutes, and it's not your job to ask. It's your job to do what you're told. Is your name on the building? Erin's doing her job. Why aren't you doing yours? Me to Dan. How much time do we waste doing this? How many times has this policy saved us money? Laura. Sherry caught someone using a license without paying at X town. Michelle found a workstation hiding in an office at Y town. Ray found an install left on an old workstation in Z town. Silence, with Laura smirking and folded arms, thinking she's won. Me. So, 3 times in 30 years. And all the while, we've been arguing with clients, filing paperwork, combing through paperwork when someone wants to move a workstation, moving files between buildings, having people retrieve paper files from archives. Dan. What do you suggest we do? Me. Handle installs as part of the maintenance fee, switch licensing models, or develop an automated license restriction method in the software. we look stupid right now, and the clients don't understand why they have to do this. Laura, well, I understand that we don't want people stealing from us perfectly well, and you're gonna do your job and call the client and tell them exactly why, and we're gonna stand here and listen to you do it. So, I have to call the client on speaker so the whole support floor can see me be broken and do what I'm told for Laura's entertainment, despite the fact that it's extremely disruptive to anyone who is on a call. Client Hannah explains her frustration with Aaron and says she sent system information sheets back in 2017. I explained that they needed to be filled out for every new workstation and that Aaron is just doing her job. Hannah asked why a tech company is demanding paperwork for licenses when every other company just has a key or is internet-based. So I told her exactly why, loudly while making eye contact with Laura. Because we have technologically inept decision makers insisting on informing a time-consuming licensing policy despite the fact that all the times it's proven useful can be counted on a shop teacher's bad hand. Edit. We'll add reactions, and I'm sorry for a double cliffhanger, but I just got told I have to go to a meeting. Gee, I wonder what it's about. Edit 2. Okay, so as I said, the guy across from me burst out laughing so hard that the clients heard it. I looked at him and missed Laura's initial reaction, and by the time I looked back, she actually just appeared hurt. Dan was looking at me with wide eyes and his mouth open, shaking his head, then turned and followed Laura. I then received an email to attend a meeting right before end of business. At the meeting, a smug-looking Laura was waiting for me in a chair across from Dan's desk. Dan. OP, we can't have people deliberately embarrassing other employees in front of everyone. Me. I agree. Laura's attempt to publicly degrade me was in really poor taste and highly unprofessional. Laura, now mouth agape and vaulting up on the arms of the chair and yelling at Dan. You're not gonna do anything about this? Dan, exhaling with puffed cheeks and resting his head on one hand, avoiding eye contact. We can't be embarrassing each other here. We have to work together. We all have to do our jobs. Thanks, guys. And I walked out. Next we've got, insult me for having white hair? Have fun covering my shifts. This happened about 2 years ago. I worked for a very popular supermarket chain in Australia. I had been shunted there after their sister company went belly up. Now, I love dyeing my hair crazy colors. It's a quirk. It makes me feel more confident in myself, and as someone with social anxiety, it was a great pick-me-up when I was feeling down. When I first got transferred there, I had blue dreadlocks, and we had a male manager. There was never any issues with my hair or dress standards, and I took pride in my work and worked hard. About a year after, we got a new store manager. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah had very clear-cut ideas about how her store should be run, and importantly, how her employees should look. At this stage, I had taken my dreads out and just had short purple hair. According to the employee guidelines, employees should appear professional and hygienic at all times. No mention of hair color whatsoever. However, the phrase professional is open to interpretation by management. You can see where this is going. It began as passing comments on my hair such as, "Wow, that's bright," etc. But as other employees began coloring their hair, Sarah sent out a memo that no unnatural colors were allowed. I was very sad. Colored hair was part of my identity and gave me the confidence I needed to interact with 200 plus customers a day. I decided I would bleach my hair snow white, so I did. Now, if any of you have done this before, you would know you need to use purple shampoo to counterbalance that brassy, bleach yellow tone to keep it white. This is a fine balancing act. Don't leave the shampoo in long enough and you have yellow hair still, but too long and your hair can get tingled pastel purple. Well, on a few occasions, I left it in a little too long and my hair was the slightest shade of purple, not even pastel, only just off a light gray color. Well, that was all Sarah needed to gun it for me, going as far as to threaten to send me home without pay. As this was going on, I had become friendly with the bottle store next to the supermarket, under the same parent company, but a different chain of command. I would cover their staff's breaks, and instead of standing around like the others do, I would face up the store and help out. Well, the manager had noticed my efforts and poached me. The best part? Because they had a different chain of command and a different interpretation of the employee guidelines, I was allowed to have colored hair again. I immediately took up the offer, and the night before my first shift there, set about making my hair a rainbow. I get in there, my new manager loves my hair, my customers are raving about it, asking how I got it so bright, what brand of dye, etc. Well, good old Sarah spots my beacon of a head from across the supermarket and beelines it straight for me. But I was ready for her. I printed the employee guidelines and called our HR team just to get further clarification that I was correct in my interpretation. I had customers in the store, but this didn't stop her from trying to tear into me. Sarah, "You can't have hair like that." Me, hands her the paperwork. Actually, I can. My manager has no problem with my hair, and the guidelines say nothing about hair color. "You are going to make my employees think that is acceptable." When your employees mention my hair, I tell them straight out that it is not allowed in your store. "This isn't the last of it. I'm going to HR about this." My new manager later told me that Sarah had gone over her head to try to have me relocated to another store and went to her area manager and complained to him about me. She was told in no uncertain terms that my hair color is not against the rules, that she is out of line to even reprimand me in the first place, and that if she does not cease her harassment, she would have to take a permanent vacation. Over the next year, I would change my hair to some other crazy color combination at least weekly. I loved the look on her face every time I walked past. My mental health has gotten so much better since leaving that toxic work environment. I feel bad for my ex-coworkers who still live under her tyranny though. Next we've got, "That's fine, I'll stop working at 40 hours. About 10 years ago, I was working as a software deployment engineer for the UK branch of a Brazilian company, owned by a US company. There were 3 of us for the entire world, all based in the UK. Our roles comprised of flying somewhere on or for a Monday, building configuration and labs in the local US company office, training their staff, updating code if things didn't work, etc. Before deploying their first site for them while they watched. They would do the second while you shadowed, and then they'd do the third with you at the hotel, but on call. A typical country engagement was 3 to 6 months because you'd be bouncing between anywhere between 4 countries at a time. Each week was a different one. Enter new HR manager for Europe. Each week, we would blast a timesheet to UK HR to allow them to send it to Brazil, who would build a US company. Quickly, the new HR manager notices that each of us is clocking in around 30 hours of overtime a week. Simply because the contract stated the moment we left our houses on a Monday or Sunday that we were now classed as working because of the international travel. We enjoyed this clause because time and a half for 30 hours a week was lovely. But that did mean that the further from the UK we were, the quicker we hit the UK limit of 40 hours per week. My record was hitting 40 hours by lunchtime Tuesday due to spending 27 hours flying to Sydney. As I said, the HR manager didn't like that we were going so far over the 40-hour limit in both our contracts and in the UK. I sat down with her and explained that it was just the nature of the job, that we didn't mind because we got overtime for it. She wasn't happy, talking about process and that they wouldn't be paying overtime for overhours from X date. Throughout the meeting, she was abrasive and rude, like she was talking to a child. Not the highest billed technician resource in the company. Naturally, quite annoyed by this, but very little we could do. The overtime wasn't in our contracts, as we were salaried employees, and it was a perk that we were given. I grabbed the other 2 in a quick huddle, and we formulated a plan. We brief our respective project managers, employees of the US company, and they each agree. The next Monday, we each flew to our countries. Naturally, I hit the 40-hour cap quickest, and at mid-morning, Wednesday, with only half of the urgent work completed for the week, I'd tell the project manager I'll pick him and our file maintenance resource when they want before jumping in the car and heading back to the hotel. I text A and B and let them know we are a go. Later on that day, A does the same. All the while, this has been escalated both via my project manager and the local company MD back at the US head office, and this back to my Brazil head office and down to our UK office. By Thursday morning my time, I get an email saying they won't pay overtime, but will give time off in lieu. Quick text-based huddle, and the other two are happy with that. I'd prefer the overtime, but if I get an additional 2 days of paid holiday a week to my holiday balance, then I'll take it. We agree, go back to working. HR manager is suitably browbeaten for her mistake, and then even more so when she realizes that time off in lieu has to be taken in a month cycle, meaning each of us had around a week off paid per month. And shoutouts to our Regenerals of the day, the magic of gaming, Mikasa, Joey, John, and Josh. Become tomorrow's Regenerals by leaving as many Rees as you can in the comments below.